The auditorium was dressed like a promise. Flags pressed flat, lights blazing overhead, chairs packed with neighbors ready to clap for something simple and good. A medal, a loyal dog, a small-town win they could believe in. At center stage, a podium waited beneath a banner that read, "Community Service Honor." And Officer Daniel Reyes stood in his dress uniform, leash looped once around his gloved hand. Beside him sat Titan, a sable German shepherd with a veteran's stillness, ceremonial harness snug across his shoulders, ribbon and pin catching the light. The announcer's voice boomed into applause, repeating the headline everyone already whispered. "Police dog refuses mouse's medal ceremony until little girl arrives." Daniel had rehearsed this. Step forward, sit, accept the medal, pose, go home. Simple, safe. Except Titan didn't move. When their names were called, Daniel tapped his thigh and said, "Forward." Titan stepped once, nails clicking, then stopped as if an invisible wall dropped in front of him. His ears lifted. His head turned toward the auditorium doors at the far end of the aisle, and he locked there, staring at empty space like it held a person-shaped shadow. The room tightened around that stare. Programs stilled, coughs died off, phones rose higher. Daniel tried again, softer, the way you talk to a partner, not a tool. "Come on, buddy." Titan didn't blink. The leash went taut with purpose, not defiance, more like a warning line drawn in the air. The announcer chuckled too loud. "Looks like Titan's taking his time," he joked, eyes flicking to the cameras for rescue. Daniel forced a smile, but his stomach cooled to ice. This dog had obeyed in chaos, in sirens, in screaming crowds. He did not freeze for nothing. Titan's nose flared, tasting the air as if it carried a scent only he could read. A low sound rolled from his chest, not quite a growl, more like an engine idling, and the first row smiles fell away. Someone whispered, "Is he okay?" Near the back, the doors stayed shut. Yet an usher checked the handle anyway, as if the building itself might be holding its breath. Daniel bent slightly, posture composed, and followed Titan's gaze to the doorway. There was nothing there but polished wood and a thin strip of light under the threshold. Yet Titan's eyes said otherwise. Behind Daniel's ribs, an old memory of another doorway and a small set of frightened footsteps flashed like heat. And he understood why Titan's body refused to perform. The medal was not the point. The missing piece was. Daniel tightened his grip on the leash, not to force Titan, but to steady himself, then leaned close and whispered, "What do you see, boy?" Titan's ears flicked at Daniel's voice, but his stare never broke. In that suspended moment, Daniel realized the ceremony had become a test of truth in front of the whole town. He straightened, lifted his eyes to the empty doorway, and said the words that cracked the room wide open. "He won't accept the medal. Not without her." That morning had begun the way good days try to begin. Clean, orderly, almost rehearsed by the town itself. Frost sat on windshields like a thin sheet of glass, and the sky over Briar Glen was a pale winter blue that made every rooftop look sharper, every breath look visible. Daniel Reyes parked behind the station just after 6, engine ticking as it cooled, and for a second he sat with his hands on the wheel, listening to the quiet before the day started asking for him. The K9 unit truck beside him was already dusted with salt from last night's patrol, and inside it, Titan shifted once, alert but calm, as if he'd been awake the whole drive even when his eyes were closed. Daniel opened the rear door and the smell of dog shampoo and worn leather rose up. Familiar, grounding. Titan hopped down with the smooth control of a working animal who understood the difference between duty and excitement. and he stood at Daniel's left knee without being told, shoulder pressed near enough to feel, eyes tracking the lot the way a camera tracks a scene. "Big day," Daniel murmured, and Titan's ears angled forward like he understood every syllable. Inside the station, warmth hit them first, then the comforting assault of coffee. Burnt and strong, drifting through corridors that carried the echo of boots and radio chatter. Officers in uniform moved with that early morning half-energy, smiles not yet fully turned on, jokes still warming up. Someone called, "Morning, Reyes," and Daniel lifted a hand without breaking stride. Titan's nails clicked on the tile in a steady rhythm, never frantic, never uncertain. That was Titan's signature. Quiet steel. In the field, he didn't waste motion. He didn't bark to prove a point. He watched, measured, and then acted with crisp certainty when Daniel gave the cue. The younger officers loved telling stories about him. How he'd stayed perfectly still during a fireworks scare that sent half the crowd ducking. How he'd walked through a chaotic accident scene without so much as a flinch. How he'd obeyed a hand signal from 20 feet away while a suspect screamed in his face. "That dog's got ice in his veins," they'd say. Half admiration, half awe. Daniel didn't correct them, but he knew it wasn't ice. It was discipline forged in nights that didn't end cleanly, in training sessions that demanded patience, in trust built so deep it felt like a second heartbeat. In the locker room, Daniel polished his boots until he could see the ceiling lights in the leather, then adjusted the stiff collar of his dress uniform with fingers that didn't shake, even though today wasn't just another day on the roster. Today the town was going to clap for Titan, and Daniel wanted it to be perfect for him. Wanted the world to see what Daniel had seen 100 times in the dark. In the K9 bay, he lifted Titan's ceremonial harness from its hook like it was something sacred. The harness was clean, the straps rubbed with conditioner, the metal rings buffed until they shone. A ribbon, deep blue with gold trim, was already pinned to it, and the small weight of that ribbon seemed to change the air between them, as if Titan could feel that today's gear meant ceremony, not chase. "Stand," Daniel said, and Titan stood. Daniel buckled the straps with practiced ease, fingers moving like muscle memory. "Stay." Titan stayed, eyes on Daniel, breathing slow. Captain Hargrove passed the doorway and paused, watching with a satisfied nod. "You two ready?" he asked. Daniel smiled. "Been ready." Hargrove's gaze flicked to Titan. "Never seen a dog this steady," he said. Not unkindly, like he was admitting something. Titan's tail gave one controlled sweep. Daniel clipped the leash and leaned in, pressing his forehead briefly to Titan's for luck, the way he always did before anything that mattered. Titan accepted it without fuss, then followed Daniel down the hall, posture perfect, the very picture of disciplined service. If anyone had told Daniel then that Titan would break protocol in front of the whole town, he would have laughed it off. Titan didn't break. Titan didn't hesitate. Titan didn't refuse. Not unless something bigger than rules was calling him. And as Daniel and Titan stepped into the crisp morning light, headed toward a day that was supposed to be simple, Daniel had no idea the question already hanging in the air wasn't whether Titan deserved a medal. Everybody knew he did. But why a dog built of obedience would decide, on the most public stage of his life, that obedience was not enough. Across town, in a small duplex tucked behind the old water tower where the paint peeled in polite strips, the morning felt quieter, heavier, as if the cold had settled not just on windows, but on a child's shoulders. Emma Clark sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded in front of her, like she was trying to make herself small enough to disappear. Her blue sweatshirt sleeves pulled down over her wrists, the cuffs worrying at her thumbs. The sunlight that came through the blinds didn't warm the room. It just laid pale bars across the tabletop, across the invitation sitting between a chipped mug and a jar of instant coffee. The invitation was plain. Cream paper, black letters, a simple seal in the corner. But it might as well have been a spotlight. Community Service Honor, it read. K9 Medal Presentation. Beneath it, one line handwritten in careful pen. Emma, we would be honored if you came. Officer Reyes. Emma stared at those words like they might change if she blinked. Like they might suddenly accuse her of being somewhere she didn't belong. She wasn't used to being invited to things that had microphones. She wasn't used to rooms where people clapped. Those places had always meant eyes, and eyes had always meant questions. And questions had always meant the kind of attention that made her skin feel too tight. Across from her, Aunt Marla moved around the kitchen in slow circles, pretending the day was normal. Rinsing a spoon that didn't need rinsing, folding a dish towel twice, checking the clock like it might offer mercy. Marla wasn't her real aunt by blood. But she'd become her guardian the way some people become anchors. Quietly, firmly, without applause. She wore her hair in a loose bun and a tired cardigan that smelled faintly of laundry soap. And her face held the careful steadiness of someone who had learned to keep panic behind her teeth. You don't have to go, Marla said gently, for the third time, the words landing like a blanket. Emma didn't answer right away. She traced the edge of the invitation with one finger, not daring to pick it up, as if touching it too much would make the whole thing real. He wants me there, she finally whispered, voice thin but certain. The he didn't need a name. Titan. The dog. The one who had looked at her like she mattered when she felt like a shadow. Marla's eyes softened, but a flicker of fear lived there too. She'd seen what crowds did to Emma, the way noise could steal her breath, the way sudden movement made her flinch before her mind could catch up. She'd also seen what the town's whispers did, the way people stared when they thought a child wasn't looking, the way they talked about that incident, like it was a story and not a scar. Emma's gaze drifted to the window where the street sat empty, deceptively peaceful. She could almost hear it again. The roar of voices, the hard laugh, the shuffling circle of bystanders who didn't step in. Her stomach tightened, and she pressed her palms flat on the table as if grounding herself. Important rooms aren't for me, she said, not dramatically. Just like she was stating a fact everyone else already knew. Marla crossed the kitchen and crouched beside her, lowering herself so their eyes were level. You are not what happened, Marla said, each word deliberate. And you belong anywhere someone wants you safe. Emma swallowed, eyes flicking down again. The invitation sat there, patient and silent. A car passed outside, tires hissing on cold pavement, and Emma's shoulders jumped anyway. Marla watched that reaction, and her jaw tightened. Somewhere deep in Marla's pocket, her phone buzzed. Once, twice. She hesitated before pulling it out, thumb hovering as if she already knew what she'd see. A number with no name lit the screen, local but unfamiliar. Marla answered with a cautious, "Hello?" And for a beat, there was only the faint hiss of a bad connection. Then a voice slid through, low and sharp, trying to sound casual and failing. "Yeah," the voice said. "About that ceremony." Marla's grip on the phone tightened. Emma looked up, reading the tension like weather. The voice continued, quieter now, like it didn't want to be overheard by walls. "Don't bring her." Marla's eyes widened, and in the same instant Emma's stomach dropped, because she didn't need anyone to explain what that meant. Someone out there cared enough to stop her from showing up. Someone out there was afraid of a little girl walking into an important room. It hadn't started with medals or banners or polite applause. It had started on an ordinary afternoon that turned sharp without warning. The kind of day Briar Glen liked to pretend didn't happen in good towns. The sky had been the color of dull steel, clouds low and heavy like they were pressing the roofs down. And the town square was busy with small errands, people ducking into the diner for pie, teens loitering near the convenience store, an older couple arguing quietly over parking. Emma had been there with Marla, hand tucked in the crook of Marla's elbow, moving like a shy shadow between shelves inside Grady's Market. Emma was quiet by nature, but that day her quietness was different. Tight, guarded, because she'd already learned that crowded places could flip from safe to dangerous faster than an adult could apologize. Marla had just turned to reach for a carton of milk when the first raised voice cut across the store like a crack in glass. "Hey, watch where you're going." The words were loud, performative, meant to pull eyes. A man stood near the front, broad-shouldered, wearing a work jacket and the kind of grin that wasn't friendly, just hungry. He wasn't yelling because someone had bumped him. He was yelling because he wanted the whole room to feel him. Emma froze instantly, shoulders up, gaze dropping to the floor the way she'd learned to do when attention got dangerous. Around them, people paused with baskets half full. And that's when the other sound arrived. Laughter, rough and pleased, coming from the man's friend near the soda coolers. "Come on, she's just a kid," someone muttered. But it was weak, tossed out like a coin rather than a hand. The bully stepped closer, eyes scanning, looking for someone smaller than him to make the point on. His gaze landed on Emma like a hook. "You," he said, pointing, as if she'd been placed there for him. "You run into me?" Marla moved immediately, body turning, arm going protectively around Emma's shoulders. "She didn't touch you," Marla said, voice controlled, polite, which only made the man's grin widen. "Oh, so you're speaking for her?" he mocked, leaning in, invading space the way predators do, betting on everyone else's silence. The store felt suddenly too small, air thick with the smell of bread and cold meat and the sour tang of fear. Emma's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. She tried to step back, but behind her was a display rack. Beside her was an older woman holding a basket of apples, who looked away like looking would make her responsible. The bully's friend snickered. A teenager pulled out a phone, not to help, just to capture. That was the moment the town failed her, not with cruelty, but with paralysis. Then the door chime rang, bright, cheerful, out of place, and 2 patrol officers entered with a K9 at heel, the leash slack between them like it was optional. Officer Reyes was speaking quietly to his partner about something mundane. But Titan did not walk in like it was mundane. The second he crossed the threshold, his pace slowed. His head lifted, his ears angled forward, and his whole body went still as if someone had hit pause. Daniel noticed instantly and stopped too, hand tightening on the leash. Titan didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stared, eyes fixed not on the loud man's face, but on his hands, on the way his fingers kept twitching near his pocket, on the way his weight shifted, coiled. It was the kind of observation humans missed because they were distracted by volume. Titan wasn't distracted. A hush rolled through the store as if everyone felt the change in the air. The bully, noticing the dog, put on a bigger smile. "Oh, look," he said, spreading his arms like a showman. "They brought a dog. What, you think I'm dangerous?" Daniel took one step forward, calm, measured, voice low. "Sir," he began. Titan remained motionless for another heartbeat. Then a sound rose from deep in his chest, a low warning growl so controlled it felt professional, not emotional. It cut through the noise like a blade. The bully's smile faltered for the first time. Emma's eyes flicked up despite herself, drawn to the dog's stillness like a lighthouse in fog. Titan wasn't looking at Emma with pity. He was looking through the chaos with purpose. And when his gaze finally touched her, it was brief. But it landed with a strange certainty, like recognition. Not just a child in trouble, not just a situation to manage. Something else, something specific. Daniel's posture shifted, the way it does when training becomes instinct. "Titan," he said softly, and Titan took one step, placing his body between Emma and the bully, with a precision that made it clear this wasn't random protection. His shoulder blocked, his stance widened, his head angled to keep both the threat and the child in view. The bully lifted his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes had changed. Calculating now, uneasy. "Easy," Daniel said, not to Titan, but to the room, to the man, to whatever was hiding behind bravado. The growl stopped, replaced by a tense silence that felt like the store was holding its breath. Emma's fingers unclenched slightly against Marla's sleeve. She didn't understand police protocol, but she understood this. The dog had seen something before anyone else did. Something that made him go from calm to locked in. And even as Daniel began to de-escalate, even as the bully tried to laugh it off, Titan's eyes never left those twitching hands, because Titan wasn't just reacting to a loud voice. He was reading, a danger the town had been trained to ignore. The man's name was Clay Mercer, and in Briar Glen that name carried a certain weight. Not because he'd earned respect, but because people had learned it was easier to step aside than to stand up. Clay had the swagger of someone who'd been allowed to get away with too much for too long, the kind of confidence that didn't come from strength so much as from the absence of consequences. He wore a scuffed work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. But it was his eyes that did the real work. Eyes that swept a room the way a hunter sweeps a field, checking who would look away first. When Titan's growl silenced the store, Clay didn't retreat. He performed. He widened his stance like he was on a stage and lifted his hands higher, palms out, playing innocent for the audience that had suddenly become very interested. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," he said, chuckling as if the whole thing was a misunderstanding, as if intimidation was just a joke people took too seriously. "I'm just talking, officer. You gonna sick your dog on a guy for talking?" The teenager's phone camera shifted closer, hungry for drama. The older woman with apples still didn't look up. A cashier behind the register froze with a receipt half-printed, eyes darting between Clay and the dog like she was trapped in a game she didn't choose. Daniel's voice stayed even, the way you keep a flame from flaring. "No one's sizing anyone," he said. "Just step back and give them space." Clay tilted his head, mock thoughtful. "Space?" he repeated, slow, savoring it. Then he stepped forward instead, reducing the distance by half a stride. He glanced down at Emma as if she was something on the floor in his way. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice dripping false concern, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You look scared. That's not my fault, is it?" Emma's throat tightened. Marla pulled her closer, turning her body sideways to shield the child's face from the man's gaze. "We're leaving," Marla said, firm, and tried to guide Emma toward the nearest aisle. Clay shifted to block them with lazy precision, never touching, never technically assaulting, just placing himself where he didn't belong. "Leaving," he said, exaggerated surprise. "Why would you leave? We were just having a talk." His friend by the soda coolers snorted, enjoying the show. And Clay's smile sharpened because the laughter fed him. Fear was the point. The crowd's silence was his oxygen. Daniel's hand tightened on Titan's leash, not yanking, steadying because he could feel the dog's muscles coiling beneath the ceremonial calm like a spring compressed. Titan's posture was still controlled, but the air around him had changed. His tail was low, rigid. His gaze tracked Clay's shoulders, then his hands, then the slight bulge at the pocket of his jacket that the man kept brushing like it was an itch. Daniel watched. It too. "Sir," Daniel said again, colder now. "Step aside." Clay looked up at Daniel like he'd forgotten the officer existed. That was part of the intimidation too, making authority compete for attention. "You know," Clay said conversationally, turning slightly so the room could see his profile. "I've lived here my whole life. Folks know me. I'm not the problem. People like—" He gestured vaguely toward Marla and Emma, as if they were a category. "People like that come in here, start drama, and suddenly I'm the villain." Marla's jaw clenched. Emma's fingers dug into Marla's sleeve, small knuckles white. The cashier swallowed hard. Someone in the back whispered, "Just let it go." It wasn't advice. It was surrender. Clay's grin widened at the whisper, because surrender was what he came for. "Hear that?" he said, voice rising, addressing the invisible chorus of scared bystanders. "Everyone wants peace. I want peace too." Then he leaned closer to Marla, lowering his voice just enough to make it intimate, threatening. "You should teach her to keep her eyes down," he murmured. "That's how you stay out of trouble." Marla's hand shook once, then steadied. "Don't talk to her," she said, sharper now, the protective edge showing. Clay's eyes flashed with irritation. Someone challenging him calmly always did that. And for a second the mask slipped. "Or what?" he asked. "You got a dog to hide behind?" Daniel took another step forward, placing himself between Clay and them, shoulders square, voice quiet. "Back up," he said, and the words landed like a door locking. Clay's nostrils flared. He glanced around, gauging the room, deciding how far he could push. The teenager's phone was still up. The crowd was still silent. Clay made his choice. He laughed loud and raised one hand like he was dismissing Daniel. Then with the other, he made a small, quick movement, fingers sliding toward the inside of his jacket pocket as if to prove he could, as if to remind everyone he held the real power. Titan's head snapped a fraction to the side, ears pricked, body shifting from stillness into readiness so fast it was almost invisible. Until you saw the leash tighten and Daniel's stance drop, grounded, prepared. The store's air went razor thin. Clay's hand hovered at the pocket opening, half in shadow, half in plain sight. And Titan, eyes locked, waited for the next mistake. Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't grandstand for the phones, didn't give Clay Mercer the satisfaction of feeling like he'd provoked a spectacle. He simply moved like a man whose mind had switched tracks from ceremony to survival, and the change was so clean it was almost frightening. His eyes swept the store in a fast, practiced arc. Front doors, side aisles, the cashier line, the blind corner by the freezer cases, the clustered bystanders who could become either cover or collateral. And then his focus snapped back to Clay's pocket with surgical precision as Daniel's left hand shortened the leash by 2 inches, not jerking, just taking in slack like you'd taken a seatbelt before impact. "Titan, watch," he said, low enough that only the dog and maybe Clay could hear it. And Titan's entire body answered. Weight shifted forward, paws planted wider, chest squared, shoulders like a shield. The dog didn't lunge. He placed himself deliberately between the child and the threat. A living wall with angles chosen like geometry. If Clay moved left, Titan blocked. If Clay moved right, Titan pivoted. If Clay surged forward, Titan's stance was already set to absorb and stop. Marla tried to pull Emma backward again, but the aisle behind them was crowded and the rack at Emma's back left no clean retreat. So Daniel gave the only order that mattered, calm as a latch turning. "Ma'am," he said, "stay behind me." Then to the bystanders, without looking at them, "Everybody take 2 steps back, now." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of inevitability. The kind of voice people obey because it makes resistance feel pointless. A few shoppers blinked like they'd been woken from a trance, baskets scraping the floor as they shuffled away. The teenager with the phone hesitated, then backed up too, camera still rolling, eyes wide. Clay's grin didn't fully die, but it tightened at the corners because he'd lost something. Control of the room. "Oh, come on," Clay said, rolling his shoulders, playing casual. But his hand was still drifting near that pocket, fingers flexing, testing the edge of everyone's fear. Daniel's gaze stayed on those fingers. "Hands where I can see them," he said, quiet, final. Clay laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. "You scared of me, officer?" he taunted. "You and your dog?" Titan's lip didn't curl. His warning was contained, an unreadable stillness that was worse than barking because it meant discipline, meaning he would act only if Daniel asked, and if he acted, it would be precise. Emma, pressed into Marla's side, stared at Titan's broad back like it was the only solid thing in a room that had suddenly become water. That's when the small object made itself known, not through drama, but through gravity. As Marla shifted, something slipped from Emma's pocket and fell to the tile with a soft plastic clack. A tiny keychain, a worn stuffed bunny no bigger than a thumb. Its fabric faded from being held too often, a thin blue ribbon tied around its neck like someone had tried to make it brave. It bounced once and came to rest near Titan's front paw. Titan's head dipped just a fraction, nostrils flaring as he caught the child's scent on it. Soap, pencil shavings, that faint metallic tang of fear. And the dog's eyes flicked back to Emma for a heartbeat that felt like a promise. Daniel noticed it too. The way Titan's attention anchored to that little bunny and the blue ribbon like it mattered, like it was a point on a map. The cashier inhaled sharply, a sound that trembled. Clay saw the drop and smirked, sensing vulnerability. "Aw," he said, voice syrupy. She dropped her toy. He took a half step forward as if to pick it up, an almost kind gesture performed for the audience. But Daniel's hand tightened and Titan shifted with him, blocking the path before Clay could even commit. The movement smooth as a door closing. "Don't," Daniel said, one word, and it landed like a deadbolt. Clay's hand paused midair. Then, because he couldn't stand being stopped, he let it drift again toward his pocket. Subtle, sneaky, a test. Titan's shoulders lowered a hair. His muscles coiled. His focus narrowed to that pocket like a spotlight snapping on. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply gave the next quiet command, the one that told the whole room this was no longer a social moment, but a controlled intervention. "Titan, ready." And the dog became pure potential energy, eyes unblinking, body set between the little girl and whatever Clay was about to pull from the dark. By the time it was over, the store felt scraped clean of oxygen, as if fear had been vacuumed out and left everyone blinking in the sudden quiet. Clay Mercer hadn't pulled anything dramatic from his pocket. Nothing that would look good on a headline. But he'd done something worse in its own way. He'd tested the room, tested the child, tested the limits of what he could threaten without consequence. And when Daniel's calm authority and Titan's poised readiness stole the audience from him, Clay backed off with a laugh that tried to pretend he'd chosen to leave. "You people are crazy," he'd called over his shoulder, palms up like a martyr. "Can't even joke anymore." Then he slipped out into the gray daylight with his friend, leaving behind shaken shoppers and a little stuffed bunny keychain on the tile. Daniel had crouched, picked the bunny up carefully, like it was evidence and a heartbeat at the same time, and returned it to Emma with a soft, "This yours?" Emma's fingers had trembled as she took it, and Titan had leaned in, nose brushing the blue ribbon once, gentle as a blessing. That should have been the end. A report filed, a warning issued, a pattern documented. In a sane system, that's what happens when a man corners a child and reaches toward a pocket while daring a cop to react. But Briar Glen's system had its own reflexes, and none of them were about protecting the vulnerable. At the station later, Daniel walked into the administrative wing, still carrying the aftertaste of adrenaline, Titan at his heel, and found Captain Hargrove waiting with a smile too relaxed for what had almost happened. "Reyes," Hargrove said, voice warm, folksy, like this was a neighborly chat over a fence. "Heard there was a little commotion at Grady's." Daniel kept his face neutral. "It wasn't commotion. It was intimidation," he replied, already pulling the incident form from the tray. "We need it on record. Mercer's escalating." Hargrove lifted a hand, palm down, the universal gesture for settle down. Now, he said, chuckling lightly. "Clay Mercer's a loudmouth, always has been. No need to make a scene over every loudmouth in town." Daniel stared at him, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. "He targeted a kid," Daniel said, each word clipped. Reached into his jacket like he had something. Titan flagged it. Bystanders were frozen. Hargrove's smile tightened at the mention of the dog, like that detail was inconvenient. "And nobody got hurt," Hargrove said, a statement shaped like a dismissal. "Which means you did your job. Good. Let it breathe." Daniel felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "I'm not letting it breathe, sir. I'm filing the report." Hargrove's eyes slid, just for a moment, toward the hallway where the chief's office sat, door closed, blinds drawn. "We'll get to it," Hargrove said. "Paperwork's backed up. You know how it is." He patted Daniel's shoulder in a way that was meant to feel friendly, but landed like pressure. "Take Titan home. You've got that ceremony coming up. Let's keep the town feeling good, all right?" Daniel walked out of the office with Titan beside him, and the station suddenly smelled less like coffee and more like something stale, like old decisions. He sat at his desk anyway, filled out the report in detail, noted Clay's hand movements, the crowd reaction, Titan's behavioral cues, and he attached the relevant body cam timestamp. He even wrote down the visual anchor, the little bunny keychain with the blue ribbon, because Titan had returned to it twice, sniffing it like it carried a truth. When Daniel submitted it, the clerk at records, young, nervous, took the folder and said, "I'll log it." But her eyes didn't meet his. 2 days later, Daniel checked the system. No log. He asked again. "Must have gotten misfiled," the clerk said, cheeks flushing. Daniel resubmitted. Another day passed. The digital upload showed an error, then vanished. "Tech's been weird," someone shrugged. Then he requested the body cam footage through the proper chain, and the response came back with a bland note. "File corrupted." Daniel didn't buy it. He'd watched that footage himself, clean and clear, Clay's smirk bright as a warning. He pulled the backup from his unit's secure drive, only to find the folder empty, as if someone had reached into his computer with invisible hands and scooped the truth out. That night, Daniel stood in the K9 bay with Titan, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights. And Titan paced once, before stopping at Daniel's locker, nose pressing the seam where Daniel had stowed Emma's description and the note he'd written to himself, "Check on the girl." Titan's ears angled toward the admin wing, even though it was empty now, and Daniel finally let the thought form fully, ugly and undeniable. This wasn't just one bully who liked an audience. This was a system that knew his name, knew his habits, and was working quietly, efficiently, to make sure certain things never became official. In a room most townsfolk never saw, up the courthouse back stairwell, past a door with frosted glass and an authorized personnel-only sign that looked more like a suggestion than a barrier. 3 men sat around a small conference table under a humming light, the air smelling of old carpet and cheap cologne. The kind of place where decisions got made quietly and then pretended to have just happened. The blinds were drawn, even though it was mid-morning, and the only bright thing in the room was the phone sitting in the center on speaker, its screen glowing like an eye. Chief Mallory leaned back in his chair with a folksy half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, fingers steepled as if patience was a virtue instead of a tactic. Across from him, Captain Hargrove held a pen he kept clicking without writing, the sound steady, irritating, like a metronome for denial. The third man, Councilman Decker, suit too crisp for Briar Glen, kept checking his watch as if the minutes belonged to him. On the speaker, a fourth voice spoke from somewhere far away, smooth and practiced, the kind of voice that always sounded calm because it always got what it wanted. "Let's keep this clean," the voice said. "We've worked hard to position Briar Glen as safe, family-friendly, good investment. This ceremony is supposed to be a win." Decker nodded as if the phone could see him. "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "The K9 medal story is gold. Hero dog, brave officer, community pride. We need that headline." Mallory spread his hands, agreeable. "We all want the same thing," he said, tone warm like honey. "A nice, positive event." Hargrove cleared his throat. "Reyes is stubborn," he admitted. "Keeps digging around the Mercer thing." The phone voice didn't change, but the temperature in the room did. "The Mercer thing isn't the story," the voice said, sharp under the calm. "It can't be. Not with the permit vote next quarter, not with donors watching. Any whiff of child incident attached to a police ceremony is bad optics. People don't hear nuance. They hear scandal." Decker tapped the table twice, like punctuation. "We steer the narrative," he said. "We honor the dog. We honor the department. We keep it simple." Mallory's smile deepened. "The town loves Titan," he said. "Let them clap. Let them feel safe." Hargrove hesitated, eyes flicking to the closed blinds. "And the girl?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. For a beat, the speaker crackled with faint static, like even the phone didn't want to carry the next words. Then the voice returned, quieter and harder. "The girl is a liability," it said. "She's a thread. If people pull it, they won't stop." Decker leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "We can't have her on camera," he said. "If she's there, someone asks why. If someone asks why, Reyes answers. If Reyes answers, it's not just Mercer. It's everything connected to him." Mallory's fingers drummed once on the table. "Clay's got friends," he said mildly, as if discussing someone's garden club, not a bully who moved like he was protected. And those friends have friends. Hargrove's pen stopped clicking. "So, what's the play?" he asked. The voice on the phone didn't hesitate. "You keep her away," it said. "You frame it as a scheduling issue, a family matter, anything. You make sure Reyes stays focused on the ceremony and not on his crusade. If he tries to turn this into a spectacle, you remind him who signs his evaluations." Decker's mouth tightened into something like a smile. "We can handle Reyes," he said. "He wants to be the hero? Fine. Let him stand there and smile." Mallory nodded slowly, already envisioning the photographs. "And the girl doesn't get an invitation," he said. Hargrove shifted, uneasy. "She already has one," he admitted. Mallory's eyes narrowed. The speaker voice dropped lower, almost intimate. "Then you make sure she chooses not to come," it said. "A warning, a suggestion, something that sounds like it's for her own good." Decker glanced at his watch again. "People obey when they're scared," he said simply. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the phone's faint electronic hum and the distant echo of footsteps in the courthouse hall. Ordinary life moving past the room where it was being shaped. Mallory leaned forward, elbows on the table, and spoke like he was sealing an envelope. "We keep the story clean," he said. "We keep the town compliant." The voice on the phone delivered the final line like a verdict, and even Hargrove swallowed when he heard it. "Because if she shows up," the voice said, "everything unravels." Daniel felt the pressure tightening around him in small, reasonable ways. Shift swaps denied, requests rerouted, a friendly hand on his shoulder that lingered a second too long. Yet the clearest warnings came from Titan, who began acting like the station itself had turned into a puzzle box full of hidden compartments. Twice that week, as Daniel walked the same hallway he'd walked 1,000 times. Titan stopped at the administrative wing door and went rigid, ears forward, nose lifting toward the seam of the frame, as if a scent had seeped through the cracks. Once, when a set of footsteps approached from behind, measured, heavy, Titan's head snapped around before Daniel even heard them, his body shifting subtly to place himself. Between Daniel and the corridor, a silent, "Something's wrong," delivered with professional restraint. Daniel started trusting those tells the way he trusted a radio tone in the dark. It wasn't paranoia when your dog, trained to read threat, kept reading the same pattern. On Thursday evening, after most of the staff had gone home and the station lights hummed in tired pools, Daniel returned to the canine bay to check Titan's gear for the ceremony. Harness polished, ribbon pinned, leash inspected. When Titan suddenly walked past the rack and nudged Daniel's locker door with his nose, then turned, then nudged it again, as if insisting on a specific place. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. Titan's eyes flicked to the hallway. Daniel froze, listening. Soft steps, a hesitation. Then a quiet knock on the bay door. 2 taps, a pause, one more. Daniel opened it to find Ellie Park standing there, the junior records clerk who always looked like she'd been assigned a job too big for her shoulders. Ellie's hair was pulled back, but loose strands clung to her forehead with sweat. Her hands were shoved into her jacket pockets like she was hiding them from shaking. "Officer Reyes," she said, voice barely above a breath. Her eyes darted over Daniel's shoulder to Titan, and Titan stared back with that unnerving calm. Assessing, cataloging, deciding. Ellie swallowed. "Can I talk to you? Somewhere not on camera?" Daniel didn't answer with words. He stepped aside, letting her in, and Titan moved 1 pace closer to Daniel's leg, not threatening, just present. Ellie pulled something from inside her jacket. An envelope bent at one corner, thick with papers and a small flash drive taped to the front with clear packing tape. I wasn't supposed to keep this, she whispered. But I couldn't. I couldn't watch it vanish again. Daniel's pulse thudded once, hard. What is it? Ellie's eyes glistened, the look of someone choosing a line they can't uncross. Your incident report, she said, the one with Mercer, and the intake log from the system before it was misfiled. I printed the timestamps. I also... She hesitated, glancing toward the ceiling as if the building itself could hear. I pulled a copy of the body cam file before it got flagged. It wasn't corrupted. Someone tagged it. Someone with admin permissions. Daniel took the envelope carefully, like it might burn him, then looked at the flash drive, feeling the weight of truth in a piece of plastic. Titan stepped forward and sniffed the envelope, nose pausing at the taped drive, then lifted his head, ears angling toward the hallway again. Ellie noticed. He keeps doing that, she murmured, almost amazed. The doorways, the footsteps, like he knows who's safe and who's not. Daniel's voice stayed low. He knows patterns, he said. So do you, apparently. Ellie gave a small, pained laugh. I didn't want to, she confessed. Chief Mallory told me to clean up the queue. Captain Hargrove said it was for the good of the department. And Councilman Decker, he came by records, smiled at me like I was his niece, and said, we don't need messy stories in election season. Ellie's hands finally came out of her pockets, and they were trembling. I thought if I just did what they said, it would go away, she said. But then I saw the note on your file. Do not attach minor. And I realized they weren't trying to protect the town. They were trying to protect themselves. Titan's head turned sharply toward the bay door as distant voices drifted down the corridor. Male, casual. Too late to be casual. Daniel held still, listening. While Ellie's face went pale, she leaned closer, words urgent and thin. They know you're different, she whispered. They know you won't drop it. Titan's posture tightened. Silent alarm. Ellie's eyes flicked to the ceiling camera outside the bay, and then back to Daniel with raw fear. Officer Reyes, she breathed. They're watching the ceremony. The moment Daniel said it out loud, he won't accept the medal. Not without her. The auditorium seemed to shrink, as if the bright stage lights suddenly exposed more than just a ceremony. And everyone realized they were standing inside a question. They couldn't laugh away. The announcer's smile stalled mid-performance, his eyes flicking to Chief Mallory in the front row for direction. But Mallory's folksy expression had tightened into something brittle, and Captain Hargrove's hand drifted toward his collar, like he couldn't breathe in his own uniform. Titan stood at Daniel's side with the leash loose. Not because he was relaxed, but because he didn't need tension to hold his line. His body was the line, planted, angled toward the auditorium doors, as if the whole building had been designed around that doorway. Daniel kept his shoulders squared and his voice steady. The same tone he used when chaos tried to negotiate, and he could feel the room's energy changing in waves. The first wave was confusion, the second was discomfort, and the third, rising fast, was curiosity sharpened into suspicion. People started whispering in layers, like wind passing through dry leaves. Who's her? What's he talking about? Is this part of it? A few nervous chuckles tried to break the tension, but they died quickly when Titan didn't move an inch. Phones rose, 1, then 5, then dozens. Small glowing rectangles lifting like candles, their lenses aimed at the dog who refused to perform. Daniel could sense, as clearly as he sensed Titan's coiled stillness, The invisible pressure trying to push him back into the script. A smiling captain, an easy line, a quick medal, a photo. The town going home reassured. But Daniel had Ellie's envelope in his jacket pocket, the flash drive a hard square against his ribs, and the weight of that proof made it impossible to pretend this was just a quirky K9 moment. Titan's ears flicked toward the aisle as footsteps shifted. And Daniel watched Councilman Decker stand halfway from his seat, face arranged into concern. Decker lifted a hand as if to take the microphone, to smooth it over, to reclaim the room. But Daniel spoke first. Quiet, precise. The click of a lock. "We're going to wait," he said. Not a request, a decision. Murmurs swelled. A woman near the back whispered, "That dog's waiting for a child," and the sentence traveled through the audience like a spark. Someone else answered, louder now, "Why would a child be part of this?" Chief Mallory leaned to Hargrove, mouths moving without sound from the stage, and Daniel saw the flicker of panic they couldn't fully hide. Because public attention was the one thing they couldn't delete from a system, and right now, it was multiplying. Titan didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't posture for drama. He simply stared at that empty doorway with unwavering purpose. And the longer he stared, the more it felt like the doorway was staring back. Then, bright and cheerful, impossibly normal in a room holding its breath, the door chime rang. Heads snapped around. The doors opened a crack, spilling a thin slice of hallway light into the auditorium, like dawn breaking through blinds, and a small figure stepped into the gap. Emma. Blue sweatshirt, shoulders drawn in, a little stuffed bunny keychain hanging from her pocket, its thin blue ribbon bouncing with each hesitant step. For one heartbeat, Titan remained perfectly still. Then his entire posture melted from steel into something gentler. His ears softened. His tail lowered into a slow, controlled sweep, and he took 2 calm steps forward as if approaching something sacred, not a stage. The change was so instant, so profound, that a hush fell so deep you could hear someone's breath catch in the front row. Emma froze at the threshold, eyes wide at the sea of faces and phones. But Titan stopped at the edge of the aisle and sat. No command, just a quiet, protective anchor. Gaze lifted to her with a reverence that made the room feel suddenly ashamed, forever doubting her place in it. Daniel's throat tightened, but he kept his composure, turning slightly so the camera angles caught what mattered. The dog, the child, the undeniable bond. Whispers turned to astonished gasps. That's her. That's the girl. And as Emma took one small step forward, then another, Daniel felt the first domino tip in his pocket. Proof, pressure, truth, ready to fall in front of everyone who had tried to keep the story simple.